This month's program update is an explanation of how the Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership works. A program update on this topic was last given in January 2024, and the presentation slides have since been updated. The Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership is a result of the statewide One Watershed, One Plan initiative administered by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, or BWSR. On the right is a map of all the One Watershed, One Plan basins statewide, and for reference, the smaller map shows where in the state watershed districts are established. The purpose is generally to align watershed planning across political boundaries on a basin-wide scale. This initiative, and BWSR programs in general, emphasize the importance of prioritized, targeted, and measurable progress. Prioritized, meaning a clear list of priority outcomes and priority resources, are identified in the plan, and the partnership continually refers back to these priorities to guide its work. The Lower St. Croix's goals and priority outcomes are indicated in the partnership's 10-year Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan, as well as lists of specific priority lakes and rivers. The Lower St. Croix's grant eligibility process is centered around these priorities. Targeted, meaning an agreed-upon scientific approach to identifying implementation actions, such as water quality improvement projects. One example of this is sequential diagnostic monitoring. And measurable, meaning there must be a way to measure progress toward goals. Examples of this include phosphorus and sediment reduction at priority lakes or rivers. The Lower St. Croix River Basin comprises the Minnesota side of the St. Croix River watershed, just above the confluence with the Mississippi River. There are 15 partner organizations ranging from watershed districts to watershed management organizations to soil and water conservation districts to counties. The Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District is located in the middle of the basin at the headwaters of the Sunrise River, which is one of the main sub-watersheds within the Lower St. Croix Basin. The partnership began in 2017 with each partner organization adopting a resolution to join the planning process. Partners worked together to write the 10-year Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan between 2018 and 2020. This effort was funded by a one-time planning grant through Watershed-Based Implementation Funding, or WBIF. The plan's time frame is from 2021 to 2030. Work under the plan is funded by biennial installments of WBIF implementation grants. The partnership develops biennial work plans to guide implementation actions and grant fund usage. Coming up in 2026, the partnership will undergo a midpoint evaluation to assess progress toward goals and implementation activities in the plan. After that point, the partnership may choose to undergo a plan amendment to make a few minor changes or embark on the full plan update and reset the 10-year timeframe. This will be discussed throughout 2026. Here is a diagram of the Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership structure. Since the partnership operates under a joint powers agreement and is not a joint powers entity, the ultimate decision-making authority rests with the partner boards. The Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District Board is one of the 15 local partner boards. Therefore, local boards must approve work plans, plan amendments, and other major action items when necessary. The Policy Committee meets quarterly and is composed of delegates from the local partner boards. Currently, Manager Jackie Anderson is the CLFLWD's delegate, and Manager Dave Bakke is the alternate. The Advisory Committee, Steering Committee, and Planning Team are composed of staff members from the local partner organizations, and they work in tandem to keep work moving forward, develop materials, and bring recommendations to the Policy Committee. Emily Hines participates in these meetings for the CLFLWD and performs some grant-funded work for the partnership in order to develop work plans and evaluate progress. We'll go over the partnership's work activities and priorities in just a few slides. Grant funding is a key driver of the work that local partners and the partnership as a whole perform. The Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment and associated grant programs are of particular importance. Zooming out for just a moment, this slide summarizes the amendment on a high level. It is funded by sales tax, and there are four main programs under its umbrella. The two programs on the left are the most relevant to watershed district work. The Outdoor Heritage Fund isn't directly related to the Lower St. Croix Partnership, but I'll just note that the CLFLWD has utilized multiple grants from Lessard-Sams and the Conservation Partners Legacy programs. These grant programs prioritize wildlife habitat benefits. The Clean Water Fund is the main program we'll talk about in this presentation. This grant fund is administered by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, or BOWSR, and it prioritizes water quality improvements. The Clean Water Fund is broken out into numerous programs which shift on an annual basis. This slide is not an exhaustive list of all Clean Water Fund programs, but focuses mainly on the ones most directly pertaining to the CLFLWD and Lower St. Croix Partnership. On the left are competitive grants, for which applications are statewide and a review committee selects the projects that best fit the ranking criteria. The CLFLWD has been very successful with the Projects and Practices Grant Program over the years, having been awarded a total of $6.7 million between 2014 and 2025. On the right side are non-competitive grants, or one might say cooperative grants. For the grant programs shown here, there is no third-party grant review committee deciding where funding goes. Each One Watershed, One Plan partnership must work together to decide where funding goes. There are numerous steps involved in allocating this funding and multiple policies and guiding documents that come into play. Local partners must navigate all of these requirements in order to ensure funding allocations adhere to all of these requirements. This slide illustrates the first few steps in the process. To start, the state allocates a biennial grant amount for each One Watershed, One Plan basin. Think back to that first presentation slide showing all of the basins throughout the state. The Lower St. Croix Basin is special because half of it lies within the 7-county Twin Cities metro area and half is non-metro. Funds are handled differently for metro versus non-metro One Watershed, One Plans, and the Lower St. Croix must adhere to both. The non-metro portion of the funds automatically goes to the partnership to be sorted into a more detailed work plan. The metro portion must be discussed among the Lower St. Croix partners that are within the metro boundary, as shown in tan on the map to the right. The CLFLWD is included in this. Metro partners must hold what is called a convene meeting and decide whether to pool the funds with the non-metro portion, to keep the metro funds separate and allocate to specific organizations, or some combination of the two. The partnership has gone through 3 biennial WBIF grants to date and has mostly pooled those funds together to be further allocated according to the established process and policies of the partnership. This table provides a high-level overview of the past 3 rounds of WBIF, plus the upcoming FY27 WBIF. Looking at the total line, you can see how much the state has allocated to the metro versus non-metro portions of the basin over the years. From FY21 to FY27, this amounts to $6.8 million being routed through the WBIF program in total. The state has announced the metro versus non-metro amounts for the FY27 WBIF, and the metro convene meeting will occur in 2026 to determine how the metro portion will be sorted. Funds can be directly allocated to a specific organization, which has occurred once so far with the Sunrise River Watershed Management Organization, which is located within the Lower St. Croix Basin, but is not a partner. Non-partners cannot apply for WBIF once it has been pooled and allocated to the Lower St. Croix work plan, so the convene meeting is their opportunity to utilize this funding. Lower St. Croix partners, such as the CLFLWD, can apply for WBIF funding through the partnership once the funds have been pooled and identified in the work plan. Here is an overview of the most recent Lower St. Croix grant work plan. The 10-year plan indicates 3 main categories for work completed with WBIF funding: implementation through best management practices and restoration in blue, implementation through shared services and staffing in green, and administration and coordination in yellow. All work occurring under a WBIF grant must be included in the 10-year plan, included in the current grant work plan, and eligible according to BOWSR policies. Since WBIF funding is limited and grant eligibility is restrictive, the grant work plan is not inclusive of all of the work in the 10-year plan. Completing the Metro Convene process and establishing the work plan is just the start of the funding decision-making process. The partnership has established a complex process for determining where WBIF funding will be spent. The complexity is in part because of the need to tie back to the prioritization, targeting, and measurable foundation of One Watershed, One Plan. So while the WBIF grant isn't competitive, it's not meant to be first come, first serve either. Partners must complete the necessary application documents in order to access WBIF funding, and there are different documents and requirements for different types of projects, versus shared services. The calendar on the right shows the open application periods for WBIF. Partners can't simply apply at any time. Applications are batched multiple times per year so they can be reviewed side by side as much as possible. Here is an example of one of the application form attachments on the left and the map of priority lakes for implementation on the right. The 10-year plan is written to reference the priority water bodies associated with every implementation line item. If a partner applies for project funding for a water body that isn't a priority in the 10-year plan, the gatekeeper criteria in the plan indicates that the project is not eligible for WBIF funding. So while Bowser has its own eligibility criteria in the WBIF policy, the Lower St. Croix Partnership imposes additional prioritization requirements on top of that. Partners must navigate all of these requirements in order to access funding. Furthermore, there are different requirements for grant applications depending on the requested amount. After all the necessary application forms are filled out, grant applications under $50,000 must be approved by the steering committee, then proceed with the contracting, implementation, and reporting accountability requirements. Grant applications of $50,000 or more go through a similar process with the addition of needing approval by the policy committee. This occurs at the April policy committee meeting. My last two slides summarize WBIF funding to date as it relates to the CLFLWD. The district has applied for and received $380,000 of WBIF through the partnership since 2021. This has enabled the district to implement a variety of projects and studies. Notably, this funding was critical to the completion of the Sunrise River Highway 61 Wetland Restoration Project. Additionally, WBIF provided project development funding for the Forest Lake Alum Treatment Internal Load Assessment and the Heath Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Project Feasibility Study. The district later obtained Projects and Practices grant for the actual implementation of both those projects. Enhanced street sweeping prioritization studies and implementation incentives are also made possible by WBIF. Enhanced street sweeping is considered enhanced because of the scientific-based prioritization studies that focus on cost-benefit. About $12,000 of WBIF spent to date went toward work completed by the CLFLWD for the benefit of the partnership in the form of administration and reporting and development of sequential diagnostic protocols. Finally, here is an overview of WBIF spending to date and where that funding has gone. Of the $4.6 million allocated to date, $3.8 million has been spent or encumbered. 47% of this has gone to shared services benefiting the watershed basin-wide, such as shared education and agricultural outreach efforts, plus 3% going toward enhanced street sweeping incentives given directly to cities. The other half of spending has gone directly to individual partners. 29% has gone to watershed districts, and 21% has gone to soil and water conservation districts. Or put another way, about $2 million has gone to partner-specific initiatives, i.e. the grant application and project request process we just went over. Of that, $368,000 has gone towards CLFLWD specific projects and studies, which equates to about 18% of the $2 million that went to individual partner projects. Alternatively, if that $2 million had been split evenly among all 15 partners, each partner would have received $137,000 or 7% of funding. The Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership will continue to implement watershed management activities over the coming years. CLFLWD board members will continue to provide updates during the Report of Officers and Managers agenda item at regular board meetings, and district staff will continually provide updates in the monthly administrators' reports.